Hey, this is the process. You have landed with me, Dr. John Bush. We are trying to help you win your fantasy football drafts this year and hopefully crush your league. Lesson 42. This is part of my team analysis series, and I titled this AFC East and North. So I'm starting, and if you've seen any of my lessons, I do like the landscape view, the top up view, the top, I guess it should be top down view. So I start at the top. So I'm going to look at the team and positions within the conference. So just get a feel if there's some aspects we need to consider for interconference play, daily fantasy sports betting, when you get some advantages and whatnot, just to kind of start thinking about those matchups coming down in September. And so that's what I'm doing, and I wanted to get the metrics out there and give a long view and a short view of what's been going on in those conferences. I like to do this each year. So let's start the AFC East here. And what we're seeing is something I call ID. That's AFC East, AE, position, team. 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20. So the last 5 years, I think that's good enough for just getting a taste of the landscape there. And then the average fantasy points across the table there, just to get a kind of a big picture of the fantasy points. So we have quarterback, running back, tight end, and wide receiver. I use the black circles to highlight the top. And again, remember, this is not the quarterback or wide receiver or running back, tight end ones. This is everybody. Backups, everybody that played at least a snap that I have in my database. So I just do a grand average there. So, for instance, just 2017, notice New England's 300 and something. I don't know if any other quarterback even got on the field that year except Brady. So I think that's kind of a skewed situation. So we always watch for, if you're data analysis, you always watch for a giraffe, right? That means that the number is way above everybody else, and it should inspire suspicion and thoughtfulness as to why is that. So I haven't checked because for what I'm doing now, it's irrelevant to that. But anyway, just wanted to throw that out. So for quarterback, there's been kind of two players, New England and then Buffalo has last 2 years has kind of taken over, and that probably was some type of impetus for Brady to leave, I think. Hate allergies. So I think in the matchups here, uh, note that Miami was second, and the Jets and New England came in dead last of the four. I'm not sure if we're going to see much of a change in that, ranking. But there it is. Looking at the running backs, New England has dominated for the 5 years. Okay. And there's probably no reason to think they won't do well again this year. So even though, losing Brady, they've still maintained within the conference a good rushing game. So I think what that would say for drafting is I would not shy away from the New England running backs necessarily if you can wheegee out. I think that's not a real word, but I made it up. Uh, who the main player is there. Okay, so I'll get into more detail down the road, but that's my view of that. The tight end, it was New England with Gronk, and then he left, and then Miami has taken over, and Buffalo has been second. Again, no reason to think Gesicki at Miami won't continue to be the dominant tight end of this conference. Not saying he's, dominant in the league, but certainly dominant here for that. So I would definitely, when I'm playing interconference team, on average, you should be looking, for play, maybe daily DFS or, some of your lineups and whatnot. Okay, so wide receivers. Wide receivers have kind of been choppy, been New England, Miami, and then the new player to the table, Buffalo, last year really lit it up, I think, with Diggs and everything, a combination of a player that really jump-started a team. I mean, you look and see in 19, it was tied with Miami, and then in 20, having added the right pieces with, the quarterback, we see that really came together. So it looks to me like Buffalo will have the passing and receiving advantages over this conference here. And I'm not saying that's everybody doesn't know that, but when you hear a lot, I like to see that suggestions anyway of data that supports opinions and gut feelings and whatever chatters out there. And I realize what if you go to the racetrack, if the hot dog man is giving tips that everybody else is happy with, it's probably time to look at a different horse. So I do understand that everybody's aware of that, and there's probably no surprises there. But anyway, maybe the running back or the tight end will have some surprises for your daily fantasy sports. Maybe people will forget some things or get enamored with other things. You never know. It's a lot of emotions in daily fantasy sports, and one day I'm going to really dip into that hard. But right now, I'm just doing regular fantasy, even though I know it has spinoffs for that. So if we graph this is AFC East, those five. So silly me. That should be 20. Okay, so that is a typo there. So not good. So that should be 2020. So we're looking at the average 5-year average, fantasy point average, FPAs, and just look at 2020 fantasy point average. So I kind of want to look long and short. Okay, I think it's important to do both, and I highlighted with stars those teams that really up their 5-year level here, and you can look at the position and what's standing out to me there and what's not. So I think it's pretty clear that the quarterbacks for this conference, with the exception of New England, have been getting better versus their 5-year average, and Buffalo really jumped up. And you can see the red line there. That's the red column there versus the green. So the 5-year average in green versus the red last year. So I think we can read that, and I think passing is always and going to continue to be the main show. On the other side, we have the rushing game, and actually there are no teams that had a 2020 season that improved over their 5-year average. None of them really were far down from that average, but I would say it's a ho-hum, with New England kind of been holding the first place down, and so nothing really surprising there. The tight end, again, Buffalo and Miami did well. Miami, Gesicki is looking good. Buffalo, with its tight ends, it's looking good. So notice the declines in the Jets and New England. So you certainly want to study the tight ends from those teams as well. That's, and unfortunately rookie tight ends, with maybe Pitts as an exception, it's just probably not going to get a lot going in their first year. So just watch for any free agents coming in, any veterans. Just kind of see if there's any improvement there. I haven't really considered that yet, but just telling you to go look at that. And finally, the wide receivers. Buffalo by far exceeded their 5-year average. None of the other teams did. So if you couple that with the quarterback improve, it pretty much seems that Buffalo's going to dominate this whole conference in passing and receptions. And so, you probably want to play those, if you have Allen or Diggs or I don't know who the number 2 wide receiver is. Don't know if that's whoever that is, and it escapes me now. Hey, I don't say I remember everything. You probably want to play those. I think that's stats is saying that, so I think we can use that. What else? So I'd like to look at percentages on a scale of 0 to 100, just to see what's going on. And so I plotted and calculated percent difference from 20 to 19. So who really stepped up over the previous year, and then percent of 2020 versus the 5-year average. A lot of those same numbers are going to be pointed to the star figures, but I like to see the percents here, and just gives me some views here, kind of especially the extremes. So, for instance, the extremes in difference, Buffalo seemed to have a good 2020, but they really, as far as difference, did fairly well, but the Jets actually improved more. And New England, of course, with Cam dropped, and Miami stayed about the same. So I think that was the pattern. And of course, their 5-year average, Buffalo looks really good across that. But I think Buffalo was starting to turn around in 2019 as well, if you'll go back and look at the data there. So that's why that number's not above the Jets. But it does kind of point that the Jets, may have a little bit of more passing power this year. So stay awake for the Jets moves. Running backs, Miami really improved. So I'm looking for any kind of improvements in recent times. Miami, all the teams had a poor 2020 versus their 5-year average, but Miami did increase from 2020 to 2019, so I would definitely, and the Jets did 11%, and the other ones, Buffalo, dropped, so that's a little concerning. I think people have big concerns about Buffalo. But if you ever want to know why, see, I like the data. When somebody says, "Oh, I'm worried about Buffalo's uh, running backs," okay, well, is that like, minus 100%, minus 50, minus 10? What is the intensity of the concern? Minus 17 is a concern, but it's not minus 50. Okay, so it's not a tragedy. It's not just an explosion downward. So think about that. And then tight ends, Buffalo and Miami really, really moved up. And notice the Jets and New England really blew up. So you want to talk about intensity and concern. Yeah, I probably will not be drafting any tight ends, New England or the Jets, and would not play any that way. So I think Buffalo and Miami are going to have that conference advantages here, and certainly Miami did well versus its 5-year average. Wide receivers, only Buffalo has perked up from 2019 and the 5-year average. Everybody else has dropped. The Jets is kind of number 2, coming in at minus 14%. So they dropped, but not just tragically, whereas New England and Miami have dropped, and I have concerns about the running back ones coming out of those teams. We'll see what happens, but right now I'm bearish on those, but we'll get to see what's going on. Again, this is all running back numbers here, so as you know, sometimes running back ones and wide receiver ones, can, still be fairly viable on bad teams, but not as viable as from better teams. Okay, and I think we've covered that. Okay, and then I plot that and I put stars by the doubles here, the double teams where we see both 2020 to 19 and 20 versus the 5-year average. And we see for quarterbacks the same story. Buffalo, Miami, and the Jets, and New England has crashed. Miami did okay for 2020 versus 19 in the running back, and the Jets did okay, but nobody did a double it. Tight ends, Miami and Buffalo both got the coveted stars there. So I have nice expectations for those tight ends. And Buffalo, again, with its wide receivers, have really put together what it needs. So just realize when you look at this, another way to think about it, if there's an injury in Buffalo's wide receiver one, that can really shift this whole paradigm here. So just be aware when there's an injury, if you go back and you look at this data, that can tell you, hey, it's probably really going to hit that team, maybe worse than you might think. So we think about that, and I think that's kind of the level depth I'm hanging with here in the AFC East. I now want to go to the North, AFC North. Same complete process here of quarterback, wide receiver, running back, tight end. I used the black circles to see who dominated. And Pittsburgh has dominated 2 years, and each of the other teams has had a good year. Cleveland had the best 2020, so that's good. And they had a pretty good 2019 as well. Baltimore just blew up. Cincinnati blew up. Pittsburgh didn't do so well. So have concerns that running backs all over the place. Some consistency with Cleveland 2 of the 3 years. So maybe there's something. Baltimore really dropped down. So people squawking about the Baltimore running game. Yeah, if you're trying to recreate 2019, just be aware that that show had come back to earth. Okay? So just kind of think about those, Dobbins and those running backs, Edwards and things from Baltimore. Just be aware that people may be higher on them than they should be. Not saying they're not good, but notice in 2020 they came back to the rest of the conference, except Pittsburgh, of course. Pittsburgh has a serious running back issue here for quite some time. Tight ends, Baltimore's had and Pittsburgh have had 2 good years. Last year, Cleveland did well. So Cleveland is quietly doing the quarterback, the running back, and the tight end. So maybe a changing of the guard on who's going to run this conference here. I think it's going to be pretty competitive this year. Wide receivers, Pittsburgh has 3 of the 5 years. They've done fairly well. And clearly, when Ben is their quarterback, the wide receivers will get fed. And they really had a banner year. But I think that's because their running backs were so weak. So I don't know if we'll get back to 134. I'm thinking there's going to be a regression closer to the 108 level. Just be aware, but still, that is so much higher than Baltimore, Cincinnati, or Cleveland here. And Cleveland, people were so surprised. Maybe they have too many mouths to feed. I don't know. I would be cautious about wide receivers from all 3 of those teams here. Pittsburgh, I'm optimistic about and continue to be with Ben as the quarterback. So to me, that's kind of my overview of it. We'll look at the graph, looking for the mysterious doublets. And quarterbacks, we see Cleveland 2020 did well. Running backs, Baltimore, Cincinnati, and Cleveland all did well. Okay, I like that in 2020, so that's intriguing. So just, be aware. But notice they were pretty close. So there was not like, that's why I'm saying people with the Baltimore running backs were thinking they're so much above the other conference players. I'm more thinking 2021 looks like this than the years before. Tight end, Cleveland woke up, got another star, and then wide receivers declined except for Pittsburgh. So I think by their running backs being so crappy that they didn't have, their tight end wasn't there. So what else could they do but hit their wide receivers over and over? So if Pittsburgh solves its running back problem, I think that's going to mean the wide receivers decline. So just the back of your head, don't blindly assume that everything from 2020, oh, and boy, my bad, that's 2020 up here. Okay, sorry, that's typo. Okay, can you imagine that with all the figures I've done? I made a mistake. So here we go, and I think I've got some more data. Love this data. So I look at percentages, another way to look at this data to parse it out. And I look at 20 versus 19 percentage difference and percentage difference 20 versus 5 year. And if we look at the quarterback, the reason Pittsburgh looked so good 2020 to 19 was that Roethlisberger got back. So if you kind of throw that out, we really see a decline in Baltimore and Cincinnati in the quarterbacks. I think Cleveland about the same, and Pittsburgh's probably closer to Cleveland here. Okay, so I think just note that Cleveland's quarterback is that whole crew is coming up more and has improved, and big concerns about Baltimore and Cincinnati. Running backs, Cincinnati actually did well versus 19. The rest of them were in the minuses, so that's always a concern. And Pittsburgh has really had issues, minus 40%. You talk about concern, there's your concern right there. The hell's going to happen? The other ones, not much change. Okay, nothing really jumping out at me. Baltimore tight ends, oh my goodness, 130%. Oh, that hurts. 2020, 2019. So be very cautious of the tight end. Just, so goes the quarterback, so goes the tight end. Cleveland did well. Pittsburgh did pretty good. Okay, they improved. Again, Pittsburgh improved because Ben wasn't there in 19 but came back. So I think Cleveland's the one that really, and you can see the 5-year comparison. It's the only one that's in the positives here. So continue to be bullish on Cleveland tight ends. Wide receivers, again, look good at Pittsburgh because Ben wasn't there in 19 versus 20. So the stats can trick you. But if you look at 2020 versus the 5-year average, it really stood out. And again, I think that's associated with the poor running back game. And I think that 32% improvement is going to get closer to, where it was previously. All the other teams were down, so nobody really did so good versus their 5-year average. Baltimore at minus 5%. It's closest to zero here on that, but nothing really dramatic. Look at the doublets here. Quarterback, Cleveland gets a doublet. Nice. Cincinnati gets a wide receiver. People cracking on Mixon. Maybe in the league he's not doing well, but in conference games, Cincinnati may have a little bit of advantage. Take a look at that. It's at least telling us to do our due diligence and think about that, coming up a little bit. So if you've got, situations where that running back is going to have, 6 games? 6 of its games are going to be within the conference, right? I guess it plays each team twice. So I guess with that new 17 week, I guess that's how it is. I don't think they're playing 3 times. I don't know. Whatever, at least twice. So that means 6 out of the 16 was that almost a third of the time you're going to have some type of advantage. So maybe Mixon is not as just, trash as people are squawking about on Twitter and podcasts. Cleveland tight end, look hard, look long. Probably a good tight end too sitting in there for sure. And Pittsburgh looks good. But again, I think that's just in response to losing Ben in 19 and having no running game. So I don't know if that is more mirage than real here. So just be aware of that. So just to kind of step back, notice I just showed you the data and I'm just applying a little common sense that, hey, that may be a mirage. So part of your lesson plan, and that's the deepest part, is when you know to, hold them and fold them, right? So that takes a long time in the process. And I don't know if that's common sense. I don't know how you teach that. I got to think about that. Not sure you can teach common sense, but everybody could use extra lessons in common sense, myself included. Okay, I think that's the end of these two. Yeah, so we're at the end here, so you can imagine I'm going to try to hit the other conferences here and see what we come up with. next time. So this is Dr. Bush. This is the process. And please come back, and thanks for your time and attention.